Picture this: you've been with someone for years, through thick and thin, secrets and scandals. You'd think that kind of love is unbreakable, right? Well, in the royal family, where everything is larger than life, from the castles to the drama, things can get complicated. When King Charles tied the knot with, he gave her a stunning diamond ring, as dazzling as the crown jewels themselves. It was a symbol of their strong, unbreakable bond, or so everyone thought. But hold on, because things have taken a jaw-dropping turn. King Charles is absolutely livid. Yes, you heard me right, he's completely outraged. And this time, he's not just sweeping it under the rug. Sources close to the palace say that King Charles has actually kicked out of the palace. And get this, he even made her return her wedding ring. That's not just any ring, it's a symbol of their years together, their marriage, and everything they've faced. So, what happened? Their marriage has survived a lot: cheating rumors, public criticism, even tough times with the rest of the royal family. But it looks like this time, something serious broke the trust. People close to the king say he's been quietly upset for a long time, but now he's finally had enough. Something made him snap, and he made a bold decision. Was this an angry moment that got out of hand, or has King Charles been holding back his feelings for months, maybe even years? And what about, where will she go? What's next for her now that she's no longer welcome in the palace? Stay with us, because what we're about to reveal might just be the biggest royal shakeup in years. Their love story started in the shadows, long before the titles, the crowns, and the palace doors officially opened for her. Parker Bowles was already part of Prince Charles's heart, but she wasn't the woman the world wanted to see beside a future king. Back in those early days, Charles was married to the beautiful and beloved Princess Diana, a woman adored by millions. Diana was young, graceful, and had a heart full of kindness. She represented hope and charm, something the royal family desperately needed. But even during his marriage to Diana, Charles never truly let go of. Their connection had been there long before Diana came into the picture. It was deep, emotional, and something that didn't fade, even when it should have. For many people watching from the outside, this was betrayal. They blamed for the cracks in Charles and Diana's marriage. She was labeled the other woman, the home wrecker, the shadow in the background. The media gave her cruel nicknames, and the public made it clear she wasn't welcome. Still, and Charles continued to see each other privately. Every stolen moment came with risk. Every glance, every meeting fed the flames of scandal. And while Diana cried silently behind palace walls, the world judged harshly. Even years after Diana bravely spoke about her broken marriage, the damage was done. The pain in her voice became a part of history. There were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded. That one sentence made a villain in the eyes of millions. But time is strange. It softens some wounds, even when scars remain. After Diana's tragic death in 1997, the public was filled with grief and shock. The princess, who spent her life in the relentless glare of the public eye, died in a speeding car in Paris, apparently trying to evade pursuing photographers. Her body was brought home under a cloudy English sky. For a while, Charles stayed quiet, focusing on his sons, Prince William and Prince Harry, but never really left his life. Slowly, almost carefully, she started appearing by his side again, first at private events, then at more public ones. The couple didn't rush. They knew the world was still watching closely, still judging. By 2005, after years of hiding, Charles and finally got married. It wasn't a grand fairy tale wedding like Diana's. There was no golden carriage, no thousands of waving fans in the streets. Instead, it was a quiet civil ceremony followed by a blessing in St. George's Chapel. But to them, it meant everything. It was the end of the waiting and the beginning of a life where they could be together openly, without shame. Still, not everyone was happy. Many people, especially Diana's supporters, felt the wound reopen. How could the woman who once stood in the shadows now be standing next to the future king? How could she wear royal gowns, attend official events, and smile for the same cameras that once hunted Diana? Tried to take a softer role in public life. She smiled politely, stood a step behind Charles, and never tried to outshine anyone. She knew she couldn't replace Diana, and she never claimed to. But the title she eventually received, Queen Consort, still didn't sit right with everyone. To some, she would always be the woman who entered the story through a side door, but kept going. She supported Charles at royal events, worked with charities, and built her own role in the monarchy. It seemed, for a while, that she had finally won some acceptance. Yet, behind the public smiles and royal waves, things were more complicated. Not everyone in the family welcomed her fully, and not all wounds from the past had healed. Charles and Camille's relationship may have lasted through decades of drama, but its beginning was messy, emotional, and filled with pain. No matter how deep it's buried, it doesn't always stay hidden forever. Their love was undeniably strong, but it was forged in conflict, tested by time, and always under the world's microscope. It thrived in secrecy before it ever stepped into the spotlight. But you know what they say, once something's broken, it never quite fits back together the same way. And maybe, just maybe, after all these years, those old cracks are finally splitting wide open. From the outside, Palace is a place of magic and elegance, with its golden gates, shining chandeliers, and perfectly dressed guards. It looks like a fairy tale. But behind those tall walls and velvet curtains, not everything is perfect. In fact, many say trouble has been quietly growing between King Charles and Queen, and now the whispers are too loud to ignore. It didn't start with a loud argument or a dramatic scene. It began slowly, almost silently, little disagreements that could be brushed off, like wanting to change the seating plan for a royal dinner or Charles disagreeing with her choice of guests. At first, the staff thought these were just normal married couple moments. After all, even kings and queens have different opinions. But over time, the tension grew. Those small arguments turned into long, quiet silences. Royal staff who had worked with Charles for years noticed something unusual. The man who once tried to keep things peaceful was now showing signs of anger. He walked faster, spoke sharper, and often avoided being in the same room as. During public events, cameras caught him walking ahead, leaving her behind without looking back. It wasn't just once or twice, it kept happening, and it was hard not to notice. Whispers started among the palace staff. Some said that had begun acting differently. She was giving out orders without checking with Charles, calling meetings, making choices about events, and even changing things in the palace. One royal helper whispered that was acting more like the boss than the queen. While she did have a role, it seemed she was trying to stretch it, maybe even test how far she could go. And that didn't sit well with Charles. What made things worse was how the public saw it. Charles always cared about the royal image. He wanted to look calm, strong, and respectful. He believed in tradition and the careful way things are done in the monarchy. But his actions were starting to look too bold. There were stories about her inviting people Charles didn't approve of. She even reportedly changed parts of the palace to suit her taste without asking anyone. These little things added up, and soon they became big reasons for Charles to feel frustrated. Then came the issue of money, and this wasn't something the king could ignore. Had started drawing attention for her spending, royal gowns that cost thousands, private parties with high-end guests, and trips that looked more like luxury vacations than royal duties. People began to talk. Some questioned whether taxpayer money was being used wisely. Others felt that was enjoying the crown too much, as if she forgot what it really stood for. The monarchy wasn't just about living in castles and wearing jewels. It was about service, responsibility, and setting an example. Charles believed in that, and to him, it seemed was stepping away from those values. Inside the palace, these issues created more distance between them. Some days, they were hardly seen speaking to one another. A butler quietly said that the king would often eat alone, choosing different dining times than. When reporters started asking questions, the palace stayed quiet. But silence didn't stop the rumors. In fact, it made them stronger. And perhaps the biggest whisper of all came when Charles reportedly told a close aide, "This isn't what I imagined." Those 6 words were enough to send chills through the royal hallways. Did he regret the marriage? Was he thinking of making a big decision? For years, the royal couple had tried to show unity, smiling for cameras, attending events together, and acting like everything was fine. But behind the scenes, trust was breaking, respect was slipping away, and Charles, a man who had spent much of his life following duty and waiting to become king, now found himself in a marriage that felt more like a burden than a blessing. The whispers weren't whispers anymore. They were conversations, they were warnings, and for King Charles, it seemed that the time for quiet patience had ended. The king had heard enough. There are moments in life that change everything, times when nothing will ever be the same. For King Charles, and that moment came like a storm, sudden and powerful, shattering everything they had built together. It had been a long time coming. Over the years, their relationship had survived countless ups and downs, criticisms from the public, whispered rumors in royal circles, and even the shadow of Princess Diana. Charles and had faced more than their share of struggles, but somehow, they always found a way to make things work. They held on to each other despite the pain and the pressure. Still, something was different now. The cracks that had appeared over the years were growing wider, and tension was building in a way that no one could ignore. It was a typical evening at Palace, but the tension between them was palpable. Royal aides who were present say the evening started as any other. Charles and had their usual quiet dinner, a moment to unwind after a busy day of royal duties. But behind the calm, a storm was brewing. There were small signs, the way they exchanged cold glances, the silences that stretched longer than usual. But it all came to a head in a way no one could have predicted. Insiders say it all started with a small disagreement, the kind every couple has. Maybe it was about a royal event or something personal. But things quickly spiraled out of control. One source claims that Charles raised his voice, letting all his frustration pour out. Caught off guard, fired back. It wasn't just a heated discussion, it was a full-on shouting match. For the first time in years, their voices echoed through the palace halls, raw and emotional, unleashing years of pent-up tension. In that instant, something in Charles just snapped. He couldn't keep up the royal charade any longer. With a decisive, almost desperate gesture, he turned to and told her to leave. And I don't mean let's take a break, no, this was immediate. He wanted her out right then and there, no delays. There were no warnings, no tears, no apologies, just pure frustration and anger that had finally reached its breaking point. The royal staff were left in shock. This wasn't what anyone expected. This wasn't something that happened in the palace. Royal marriages, even those filled with tension, never ended this way. There were always meetings, discussions, and carefully planned exits. But not this time. This wasn't royal behavior. This was something entirely different, a raw, unfiltered moment of anger. And then came the real shocker. Charles looked at the woman he'd shared so much with, his once forbidden love, the one who'd stood by him through thick and thin, and told her to give back the wedding ring. That ring wasn't just jewelry, it was the symbol of their entire relationship, given with promises of love and unity. It had weathered scandals, public backlash, and years of gossip. But in that moment, Charles's emotions took over. The pain and frustration were too much. Heartbroken and in shock, did as he asked. She slowly took off the ring, maybe hoping that removing it would somehow lighten the heavy burden of their shared past. She had worn it with pride, but now it felt like a shackle, a painful reminder of what was lost. With her heart heavy, left the palace that night. She didn't cry out for attention or ask for sympathy. There were no cameras flashing, no reporters scrambling to get a final shot. There were no grand gestures, just a quiet departure. She left with her head down, walking slowly toward the palace gates, knowing that something had broken that could never be fixed. And with that, the palace gates closed behind her. As the royal staff went about their duties, no one could have predicted the shock that would come the next morning. When the world woke up, the news hit like a thunderclap. The headlines screamed, "The Queen is gone." The woman who had stood beside the king for years, the one who had finally earned the title of queen consort, had disappeared overnight. The palace, usually a place of controlled calm, was now filled with questions. Was this the end of the royal marriage? Would return? Would Charles ever speak to her again? What was clear, however, was that everything had changed. What had once been a private struggle between two people who had loved each other through thick and thin had now become an international story. And as the world looked on, everyone wondered, how could it all fall apart so quickly? The royal family is famous for one thing, keeping quiet. No matter what happens, they smile for the cameras, wave to the crowds, and lock their emotions away. It's been that way for generations. But this time, this was too big, too shocking, too real. Even they couldn't act like everything was okay. Prince William and Princess Kate were some of the first family members to react. According to insiders, they were surprised when they heard what had happened, but not completely shocked. For a long time, there had been quiet tension between them and, though they had always been polite in public, smiling at royal events and standing side by side at ceremonies, behind the scenes, things were not as smooth. Some say Kate never fully trusted, and William often kept a respectful distance. They never caused drama or stirred the pot, but there was a sense of carefulness around, as if they were always waiting for something to go wrong. So, when King Charles made his bold move and asked to leave the palace, William and Kate didn't protest. In fact, they quietly supported his decision. They believed the crown needed to rest on a stronger foundation. Too many cracks had been forming under his presence. For them, it was time for the monarchy to refocus and rebuild its image. Other members of the royal family reacted differently. Some were shocked and saddened. Had been in their lives for decades. She wasn't just the queen. She was a wife, a stepmother, and a familiar face at holiday dinners and family gatherings. Her sudden disappearance from the palace left a hole, especially for those who had grown used to her being around, even if they didn't always agree with her ways. They felt sympathy for the way things ended. There was no warning, no discussion, just a sudden storm, and then she was gone. A few royal relatives tried to remain neutral, choosing not to take sides. They didn't want to be caught in the middle of a personal and public royal breakup, but even they couldn't deny the truth. Something had to change. The royal image had been taking hit after hit, rumors, scandals, growing public criticism, and now Charles had finally taken a stand. He was no longer just reacting to problems. He was leading, making decisions, and protecting the image of the crown. But the royal family wasn't the only one reacting. The public's response was just as loud and divided. Some people were absolutely thrilled. Longtime supporters of Princess Diana saw this as justice finally being served. To them, never deserved the title of queen. Her history with Charles was too messy, too painful, especially in the eyes of those who still mourned Diana. When they heard the news, many felt relief. Social media lit up with people saying, "It's about time," and Diana finally gets peace. Others had a softer view. They believed that, despite her rocky start, had worked hard to fit into the royal world. She had kept a low profile, stayed respectful, and tried to win people's hearts over the years. These people thought her exit was harsh. Some even said Charles acted out of anger, not wisdom. To them, didn't deserve to be thrown out like that, especially after years of loyalty. Then came the explosion online. Social media became a battlefield of opinions. Hashtags like out, Charles takes charge, and Queen No More started trending within hours. Memes, videos, and voice messages flooded the internet. Instagram, Twitter, every platform was buzzing with royal drama. People speculated wildly about what exactly happened during the fight. Some claimed they had inside information, others just guessed, but everyone had one thing in common: they were watching closely. News channels around the world picked up the story. Talk shows debated it. Even newspapers in countries far from the United Kingdom had exit on their front pages. It was more than a royal disagreement. It had become a global event, a moment that reminded everyone that even in the most powerful families, things can fall apart. The people waited. What would King Charles say next? Would there be an official statement? Would respond? Or would the palace, as it often does, return to silence? For now, the world could only guess. But one thing was clear: the royal family had changed forever. So, what's next for? Where do you go when you're suddenly cut off from the most powerful family in the world? She was at the center of it all, mingling with world leaders, attending glamorous balls, wearing the crown. Starting over? That's not going to be a walk in the park. Sources close to the royal circle say that is currently staying in one of the smaller royal homes, far away from palace. It's quiet, private, and heavily guarded, but even that might not last long. Rumors suggest that she's considering something drastic, moving out of the country altogether. The United Kingdom press is relentless, and every step she takes could be turned into a headline. By leaving Britain, she might hope to find some peace and escape the constant cameras and whispers. She hasn't made any public appearances since the night she left the palace, no interviews, no social media. She's gone silent, and for that, silence might say more than words ever could. But people are watching closely, waiting for her next move. There's also serious talk about her royal title being removed. If that happens, she will no longer be known as queen. She would go back to being the Duchess of Cornwall, a title she held before marrying Charles. It may seem like just a change of name, but in the royal world, it's a big deal. It would be a public sign that her role in the royal family has officially ended, a fall from grace in front of the entire world. Things may also change for financially. Being queen came with major privileges, private cars, a full staff, royal travel, and fancy wardrobes. Without royal support, those luxuries might disappear. She may need to live more simply, something she hasn't done in years. No more lavish dinners, no more front-row seats at global events. For someone who had grown used to royal treatment, it's going to be a harsh new reality. But beyond the titles and money, there's something deeper going on: the emotional toll. Spent decades by Charles's side, through love, scandal, marriage, and royal duties. To be told to leave, to take off the wedding ring, to walk away without a goodbye must feel like losing everything at once. Friends say she's heartbroken and still trying to understand how things fell apart so quickly. Still, some believe won't stay quiet for long. She might speak out, maybe in a tell-all interview, maybe through a book. Maybe she'll sit across from a famous television host and finally share her side of the story. And when she does, it could shake the royal family all over again. Because when love turns into loss and silence turns into a story, everyone wants to be heard. And there you have it. A royal love story that weathered scandals, heartbreak, and public disdain has finally crumbled. King Charles, usually the picture of calm and forgiveness, has hit his limit. And when a king takes a stand, the whole world pays attention. Kicking out of the palace and demanding she return the wedding ring wasn't just a personal decision, it was a powerful message. A message that said, "This is my crown and I won't let anything hurt it anymore." Once called queen, is now living outside the royal walls, away from the life she once had. Whether people feel sorry for her or not, one thing is clear: her chapter in this royal story may be coming to an end. But what happens next? Will Charles find peace now that she's gone, or will guilt creep in later? Will fight back? Will the royal family speak out? In the world of royalty, nothing stays secret forever. Cameras are always watching, people are always guessing, and just when we think the story is over, something new comes to light. One thing, for sure, this moment will be remembered not just as gossip, but as a major turning point in royal history. A king standing up for himself, a queen falling from grace, and a nation watching, wondering what comes next. Thanks for staying with us through this dramatic tale. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, because if you think this was shocking, just wait. The royal world always has more secrets waiting to be revealed.